According to Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov, the outgoing U.S. administration of President Joe Biden is fully committed to prolonging the conflict in Ukraine and is doing everything possible to drag the hostilities on. Is this true? Let's connect some dots and find out.
Connecting the Dots with Dr. Wilmer Leon, where the analysis of politics, culture, and history converge.
And welcome to the Connecting the Dots podcast with Dr. Wilmer Leon, and I am Wilmer Leon. So here's the point. We have a tendency to view current events as though they happen in a vacuum, failing to understand the broader historical context in which most events take place. During each episode, my guests and I have probing, provocative, and in-depth discussions that connect the dots between these events and the broader historic context in which they occur, thus enabling you to better understand and analyze the events that are impacting the global village in which we live. On today's episode, the issue before us is President Joe Biden has authorized Ukraine to use powerful long-range ATACMS missiles deeper inside Russia. Is this a last-ditch effort to prolong the inevitable? My guest is a Moscow-based international relations and security analyst, Mark Sleboda. As always, Mark, welcome back.
Dr. Leon, thanks for having me. It's always an honor and a pleasure to be on Connecting the Dots.
Mark, thank you so much. I really appreciate this. And so now it's been reported that the decision to allow the use of the Army tactical missile systems, or ATACMS, inside Russia, it's been under consideration for months. Some American officials had concerns that a decision of this nature would escalate the war, while others worried about dwindling stockpiles of these weapons. So, Mark, is this another wonder weapon that's going to change the practical dynamics on the battlefield, of which there have been many and none have accomplished that? Is this just going to piss off President Putin and the Russians, or is Russia anticipating policy adjustments with the incoming Trump 47 administration?
Okay, so first of all, to the question, is this some new wonder weapon? No, this weapon has already been used on the battlefield for a year. It was a year ago that ATACMS were first used. Now, the range at which they're being used, the direction made.
Right, that's my question, right?
Yeah, that is an escalation, right? Previously, those have been used in parts of Ukraine that the Kiev regime still considers their own, in the Crimea, in the Donbass, in Kherson and Zaporozhye. The ATACMS missiles have been used, but now they are being used in Russian territory. And although the New York Times at first, evidently erroneously, reported that the decision had been made thus far to only use them within a very narrow range of territory in the Kursk region, we have already seen, according to both Kiev regime and Russian reports, that the first 6 missiles, ATACMS missiles, have been fired, but they were fired into the Bryansk region of Russia. So obviously the New York Times story is at the very least not 100% accurate. Here's the one of the issues why this is not a game changer, even with, let's say, an increased range of use, is that Russia has long developed a profile of these missiles with its very powerful electronic warfare and air defense systems. The Western media has reported previously about Russia's electronic warfare's ability to render U.S. wonder weapons useless because it can jam the GPS signal that guides these missiles to target, rendering them useless hunks of metal floating through space at an indeterminate target. And Russia's air defense, I think even most Western analysts will admit, however grudgingly, that Russia has the best air defense systems in the world, because that is what they focused their military development on, because as an asymmetric response to NATO, US and NATO's overwhelming focus on projection of power through aircraft and missiles. So of the first 6 missiles that were fired into the Bryansk region, according to the Russian Ministry of Defense reports, 5 of them were shot down through a combination of Russia's long-range S-400 air defense system and their more medium-range Panzer systems. And the 5th missile was hit and damaged and came down close to the target that they were actually aiming at. But it caused fires, but it did no actual damage to the target itself. So we are told by the Financial Times, we've heard previously, that only a limited number of these missiles was transferred to the Kiev regime. That the Pentagon is very, very loath to give up these weapons. One, it says, it has made perfectly clear the Pentagon did not want to do this. They said that they would provide no effective change on the battlefield. This is according to the Pentagon. If the Kiev regime hoped to hit airfields through which Russia was operating over the skies of Ukraine, that Russia had already moved its aircraft's permanent operations out of range of the ATACMS. So evidently the first target that they tried to hit was not even a airfield. It was an old Soviet era arms depot whose weapons ammunition has not even been used in the special military operation. And of that limited supply, supposedly the Kiev regime has only 50 left. The Pentagon doesn't want to give them any more because it is very worried about a conventional war that it intends to provoke with China in the South China Sea and the Taiwan Straits within the next few years. And they're very worried about a missile gap. They want these missiles for that. And the production of them is essentially non-existent at this point. So 50 missiles minus 6, that leaves us with 44 and counting. And they've just wasted 6 of these fairly valuable and low supply missiles on a target that, even if they have hit it, while it might have made a big explosion and secondary explosions indicating an arms depot had been hit and providing lots of nice pictures for the information war, it actually wouldn't have affected the special military operation at all, because that arms depot wasn't even being used, at least thus far, during the special military operation, because it was mostly old ammo that wasn't needed. So once again, it seems, even when granted these supposedly behind the line strikes, that will, at least according to the New York Times, help the Kiev regime keep control of parts of the Kursk region of Russia. That's not even what they aimed at. They aimed at some old unused ammo dump in the Bryansk region, because presumably if they had hit that, it would have created these big explosions and pretty pictures for the media consumption, for the information war. I don't call that a smart military strategy, but that maybe we should be glad for that.
So to your point about Russia has developed a profile of these weapons. Well, first of all, let me say to Andre, thank you for that super sticker. David K asks about are ATACMS essentially outdated, and that they were a system that was supposed to originally have been phased out and replaced. And so with all of that, is this really right now more sizzle than steak?
Okay, so the ATACMS is due to be replaced. There is another such ballistic missile system, right? A short-range ballistic missile system that is still in development. It hasn't exited development into production yet. That said, the ATACMS, let's not mistake this. The ATACMS is a fairly effective and accurate ballistic missile system, right? It is fired from the HIMARS launcher, which makes it convenient. The HIMARS are the M270. So it cannot be fired in volleys. It has to be fired in single shots. But the Kiev regime already still has a number of HIMARS that it can use for this purpose. It's not a bad system. It's not a bad missile. It's simply that Russia's electronic warfare and air defense are the best in the world.
So with that, let's move on then to the next issue, and that is the Washington Post reported earlier today that President Biden has now, we know, approved the use of the ATACMS deeper into Russia, but has approved the shipment of anti-personnel mines to Ukraine. And allegedly, the Ukrainian lawmakers are refraining from using these mines in heavily populated areas. This is supposed to repel an ongoing Russian advance.
Yeah. Okay. So first of all, the U.S. has long provided the Kiev regime with anti-tank mines, right? Up until now, the Biden administration has refrained from granting anti-personnel mines, but Biden is having a going out of business or going out of office sale and is tossing anything that the Kiev regime might have any potential use for left that he can pry out of the Pentagon's hands and tossing it to the Kiev regime. So the idea that the Kiev regime would not use these anti-personnel mines in highly populated areas is absolutely absurd. The Kiev regime, while it was still within range of Donetsk city, which it no longer is, was regularly using, shelling Donetsk city with petal mines, which are a small mine, that anti-personnel mine that is specifically colored and designed to essentially look like a small leaf to make it much harder to identify. And while these were not the kind of mines that would completely and automatically kill a person who stepped on them, they will certainly blow your leg off. And it was a regular feature for years because they've been using these since 2014 on the streets of, shelling Donetsk city, that if you saw a bucket upturned on the sidewalk or the street or something cordoning it off, to beware, because that was people marking petal mines that were scattered around the city because it happened on such a regular basis. Now, with these anti-personnel mines that the Biden administration is sending, I don't believe that they probably have the remote mine laying capacity like with the petal mines. But if they've shown such indiscriminate use of anti-personnel mines before, I'm sure they will find plenty of uses for them that are equally indiscriminate going forward.
There's a lot of discussion or has been over the last day or so about President Putin announcing a change an amendment to Russian nuclear strategy or response strategy. And I want the audience to really appreciate the fact you are joining us from Moscow. So what does all of this really mean? And I think it's important, no matter what it means, for people to understand it's in response to American action. It is not a provocation of American action. Mark Sleboda.
Yeah, so Putin has signed the ratified version of the changes to Russia's nuclear use doctrine. Up until now, Russia has had a very tight, very clear, very restricted doctrine for the use of nuclear weapons. Previously, it was they could only be used if a weapon of mass destruction was used on Russian territory, or if there was in such an overwhelming conventional attack on Russia that threatened the very existence of the Russian state. Let's toss up a fanciful scenario that would meet those requirements. Let's say there's 1 million U.S. troops marching on Moscow, right? If the U.S. diverted all of its military from everywhere else in the world, all of it, emptied all of its 800 plus military bases and sent them all into Russia, and started a draft and managed to cobble together an army like it. That is when it would have been used. Now, in response to all of the escalations in the last 2 years, Russia has loosened its nuclear use doctrine. And some of the salient points of this new doctrine are: one, the nuclear shield, Russia's nuclear umbrella, is officially extended over Belarus, which is important. Two, if an attack is made by a third state with the assistance of a nuclear powered state, that will be considered an attack by the nuclear powered state. So if the U.S. assists the Kiev regime and they conduct an attack, then Russia, let's say with a weapon of mass destruction, chemical weapons or biological weapons or a dirty bomb or whatever they cobbled together in Kiev at their desperate hours, then Russia will consider that a weapon of mass destruction strike by the United States. A third expansion, even loosening it, will also include giving Russia the right to respond with nuclear weapons in event of a mass drone, missile, or aircraft attack on Russia. Now, here's where it actually gets a bit problematic, because what does mass mean? That is up for perception. The Kiev regime has already launched attacks with some 200 Western provided drones before. Is that a mass attack? Could Russia justify the use of a nuclear response if they really wanted to after that? That is interpretational and left up to the president, and I would presume the Russian military's decision of what constitutes mass that would warrant it. So this is done in response to Western escalation and an attempt to effectively, at the end of the day, to deter US and NATO from getting more directly involved than they already are, i.e. boots on the ground or something of the like. And it needs to be pointed out why these ATACMS strikes deep into Russia are being taken so seriously, and that Putin laid such a clear red line on their use. Because these weapons, first of all, they have to be actively guided to target by US GPS. And secondly, the targeting sequence of these weapons, like the British Storm Shadows and the French Scalps, has to be programmed into the missiles themselves by American military specialists. It has proprietary and classified software coding that the US would never just transfer the knowledge of, because that would potentially be leaked to Russia. And that would represent a serious breach of weapon information security for the entire system. And we know this because no less a person than the German Chancellor, Olaf Scholz, when publicly defending his decision not to send German Taurus cruise missiles, he said that I will not put German troops on the ground to fight against Russian troops, because that is what they'll be doing. Like the British have and the French have, and there was mention by German generals in a leaked audio of those guys with American assets running around Ukraine. Maybe we could get them to launch our weapons too, right? So this is not, as it is being presented, allowing the Kiev regime to use ballistic missiles deep inside Russia. This is the Biden administration firing American weapons with American satellite guidance, targeted by Americans into Russia. The Russian government, Putin, has detailed this specifically and said that it will be an act of war by the United States on Russia, and that Russia would respond. And he has reserved the right to strike the United States, or if this use is expanded to the British Storm Shadows and the French Scalps, to those countries as well. But from his comments, it appears that far more likely is he would continue the same fig leaf of proxy warfare and hand these weapons off to someone who would use them against the U.S. or against U.S. bases or military assets, which are, there's so many of them around the world that there's a plethora of targets to choose from. And specifically, CNN reported months ago that the US and Saudi Arabia talked Russia out of providing long-range anti-ship missiles to the Houthis, to the Ansar movement in Yemen, that are conducting a blockade of the Red Sea against Israeli and Israeli allied ships over the ongoing genocide in Palestine, which reads U.S. ships. They have launched many attacks on U.S. warships, cruise missiles, ballistic missiles, drones. And if Russia provided them with very powerful long-range anti-ship missiles, you can kiss an U.S. aircraft carrier or other supporting naval ships trying to reassert control of shipping in the Red Sea goodbye. Now, officially, this
go ahead.
Officially, this was stopped at the time, presumably because Biden agreed not to send these long-range ATACMS. Now that or not to use these long-range ATACMS inside Russia. Now that he is, it makes it far more likely that Russia will just pick off right where they were doing. And it is some U.S. Navy personnel and Marines who will pay the price for Biden's recent escalation. Now, it is likely that Putin will hold off until Trump is inaugurated in January. He understands that this is an attempt by the Biden administration to further entwine the U.S. In this conflict directly before he exits the stage. Presumably, there is the possibility, at least, that Trump will try to, well, if not bring peace, at least de-escalate on the U.S. side, and Biden, in an absolutely unprecedented and an unheard of move for what is supposed to be a U.S. government in transition after an election, to further escalate a conflict that the Trump administration, the incoming Trump administration, has already made clear they wish to change policy on. That is, well, one, I have to say that I have a feeling that the whole thing is motivated out of a great degree of personal hatred and spite.
Wow.
By Biden, both for the Trump administration and, of course, for Russia. Particularly when the Pentagon tells us that it's not going to change anything on the battlefield. So what does that leave us with? Tying down the Trump administration to a warmongering policy that has, I mean, we are on the brink of World War III. I mean, we're pretty close to it. Right? Russia, they consider that the U.S. has just launched ballistic missiles into Russia. The fact that they managed to shoot them all down is not to the point of such a precedent. Russia has deterrence to think about here. So this is obviously a salami slicing tactic. The Biden administration might even be hoping that they can get away with this escalation and that Russia won't respond because they know the Trump administration is coming in less than 2 months' time. But Russia has to weigh that of, well, with this group of neocons that Trump is surrounding himself, what are the likelihood that he actually will de-escalate or even try to de-escalate? And, do we have to set a deterrence precedent to what is a U.S. attack on Russia? So that is the questions that the Kremlin is wrestling with right now.
So I will, just to try to shortly summarize that, could it be that Russia is trying to decide it, and 544, thank you for that super sticker, is Russia trying to decide, do they need to let the United States know? Do they need to let the incoming Trump administration know that they're not bluffing? Okay. Two other really quick questions. One, it was reported probably Monday that German Prime Minister Olaf Scholz made a call to President Putin, and that Canadian President Justin Trudeau basically backed the call. Your understanding of that, and is that an indication that Europe is in anticipation of a Trump administration, that Europe is now starting to say to Russia, hey, let's see if we can pump the brakes here, because in 2 months we're gonna be looking at a whole different perspective. That's quick question number one. Then I got a follow up to that, or unless you just want to, after that, speak to this issue about North Korean troops on the front line.
Yeah. Okay. So first of all, with regards to the Scholz phone call, obviously there is some trepidation in Europe, but from Europe as a whole, what we have heard from the leadership and the foreign policy elite of European countries is at least the intention rather to double down, to escalate in response, to take up for the U.S.'s slack. Whether they'll be able to do so in any realistic way is another question. It is actually, I think, more than likely that Olaf Scholz's call has more to do with domestic politics in Germany.
Okay.
The German coalition government of Olaf Scholz has just collapsed. They're facing a vote of no confidence, and they've already scheduled snap elections for February. The leader of the Christian Democratic Union, the largest other party in Germany that is expected to win a plurality of the upcoming election, the leadership of the Christian Democratic Union, Merzer, he has already indicated that he wants to escalate. He wants to send Ukraine the Taurus cruise missiles. He wants to escalate Germany's involvement in the conflict, a decision that is that does not receive the approval of the German people. Scholz, knowing that, is almost certainly trying to use this phone call with Putin to basically say to the German people, you don't love me, but if you don't keep me in now, the guy will replace me is going to get us even more involved in this conflict than I have. And considering that basically Scholz called and just read boilerplate points of accusation at Russia, which Russia did right back to Germany, and obviously the conversation was no more substantive than that.
Okay.
A reiteration of positions makes it likely that it was a domestic nature rather than indicating any dramatic change in foreign policy, unfortunately. As to this North Korean troops fighting Ukraine in Russia. Now, Russia and North Korea are now treaty allies. This has been ratified by Russia. And I have no doubt that there are North Korean troops somewhere in Russia. They are almost certainly going about the process of training and interoperability exercise. But this idea that there are thousands of North Korean troops waiting to attack Ukrainian forces occupying Russian territory in Kursk, there's no evidence of it thus far.
Okay.
And it's extremely unlikely because North Korean and Russian troops have not trained together since well before the end of the Cold War, and they have zero military interoperability. This is a very complex conflict. It is likely that there are some North Korean personnel behind the lines learning what Russia is doing, because this type of military experience against a near-peer adversary is extremely valuable for militaries. The U.S. is learning a lot from this conflict. So I think that this has been blown up into some type of fantasy fan fiction Red Dawn story by the Zelensky regime, and kind of late in the day, echoed by the U.S. And Western powers, not because there's any truth to it, but because the Kiev regime hoped to get escalations from NATO, from the U.S. and NATO out of it that they have not gotten thus far. And that appears to have been some success with this or the U.S. conducting, long-range missile strikes into Russia that they had previously denied. At least according to New York Times, the idea of hitting these invisible North Korean special forces super soldiers that no one has been able to find yet, Sixth Sense, I see North Korean people. It appears likely that stratagem of Zelensky's, of some North Korean soldier fan fiction, was successful, at least according to the New York Times.
Mark Sleboda, as always, again, joining us from Moscow. Thank you so much for your time. Great. You have a whole lot of fans here that are just giving you hearts and loves, and they love you because you don't sugarcoat anything. You tell the truth. They're all kind of wonderful Mark Sleboda comments here, which is why I'm so appreciative of you joining the Connecting the Dots and helping us to connect these dots. Mark Sleboda.
Well, here, a bitter black pill for every one of you out there.
and let me also say, even though now you're Loving that sport coat and that sweater combo, man. I like that. I like that. Appreciate it. Take care, Mark.
Cynic and fashion item.
There we go. Thanks, man.
Cheers.
All right, folks. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to go from one brilliant analyst to another brilliant analyst, which is why you join us here on Connecting the Dots. There are a number of stories, but 4 U.S. senators say they will vote to block weapons shipments to Israel. The vote on resolutions introduced by Senator Bernie Sanders to block several weapons deals will take place today in the U.S. Senate. Sanders was joined by Democrat Peter Welch of Vermont, Jeff Merkley of Oregon, Chris Van Hollen of Maryland. They've co-sponsored these resolutions, while Senator John Thune, Republican from South Dakota, the incoming Senate Majority Leader, took aim at the resolutions in comments yesterday where he vowed the Senate will make clear the U.S. stands squarely behind Israel when Republicans take over in the next 6 weeks. Let's just start the conversation there with my next guest. He is an incredible journalist based in Beirut, Lebanon, award-winning journalist. He also is the founder of freepalestine.video. Go to freepalestine.video to get real-time coverage of what's going on the ground in the Middle East. He joins us from Beirut, Lebanon. Laith, my dear brother, Laith Marouf, as always, welcome back.
Thank you for having me, Wilmer.
So the story that I just read isn't a surprise, but I think what it does is it validates the hypocrisy that a lot of people may have perceived in thinking that the rhetoric we were hearing during the election about support for Gaza, not support for Gaza, some thought that the Republicans might bring about some different type of policy. No, everybody's in the pool here, and there's no real distinction between what the Republicans are proposing and what the Democrats are doing. Laith Marouf.
Oh yes, and we can definitely look at the statement by the new leader of the House saying that they're going to give Israel anything it wants to. In fact, today we heard a British minister also saying that they're ready for British soldiers to die to save the Zionist colony. And so what we will see in the next few weeks as the situation worsens in the area and the beginnings of direct involvement of the Western forces, not camouflaged, but direct involvement. We may also see American soldiers and Western soldiers coming back in coffin. This is all going to happen before Trump gets into power. And so when Trump comes into power, he will have no choice but to continue this war and involve the U.S. even more so in it. Similarly, as we saw, you were talking to your guest just before me about what's happening in Ukraine. This is the same strategy that the U.S. elite are doing right now there, with the beginning of the ATACMS missiles being allowed to be used to hit Russian territory. It may look like the Democrats are trying to entangle Trump in a continuation of the war, but actually they're doing him a favor. In both cases here and in Ukraine, the establishment in the US is going to try to score as many points as possible before the coming of Trump, so he can have a better hand on a negotiating table if he decides to negotiate with Russia and the axis of resistance, and or better hand on the battlefield if he decides to go to war with either of those competitors to U.S. hegemony in the region.
And let me say, man, you got a lot of fans here. Verna gives you a big thumbs up. Rampless Sense 01 gives you big hearts and thumbs up. This is actually the international headquarters of the Laith Marouf fan club, and I am the international president. I want everyone to know that. And Chanel asks a great question here. Is Bernie Sanders playing us? Is he putting forth a proposal that he knows will fail so that he and some Democrats can then, well, we know he's an independent, but so that he and Democrats, some Democrats can try to claim some moral high ground on the issue?
Oh, yes, it's controlled opposition. Bernie Sanders, AOC, any of those elected officials are controlled opposition. And the role of specifically Bernie Sanders is to keep the whole population in the US, even the ones that are opposed to the due policy of the US system, to still be thinking that there is some democratic way out of the mess. So people still being invested in voting when it's a system that doesn't work. Similarly, AOC and the quote unquote, radicals or whatever you want to call them within the Democrats play that role of keeping people that want some change within the illusion that the change is possible, which is not possible. Bernie Sanders didn't achieve anything in all his career in terms of congressman for anybody in the U.S. as citizens. We don't even have to think about Palestine. Did he achieve anything to better the life of American citizens or those AOC types? So no, they're just all controlled opposition.
There's a story that I read today. Gaza security forces ambush gang accused of looting aid with Israeli support. Palestinian security forces this past Monday killed at least 20 members of an organized gang accused of looting aid trucks in the southern Gaza Strip. This is according to the Interior Ministry. The ambush by local security forces came 2 days after 100 trucks were violently looted after crossing into southern Gaza. 2 points here that I'd like for you to speak to. One is the fact that there is this accusation that Israel has been very sporadic in allowing aid in, and now you have Israeli-backed forces looting these trucks. And the other thing, that there are still forces in Gaza that can challenge Israeli-backed forces. Because a lot of people think when they look at what is being brought, the photographs and we know that Gaza has been decimated, but there are still forces there of resistance.
Oh yes. So the story is that the Israelis tried multiple ways to challenge the control of the resistance inside Gaza. They failed in trying to get the Palestinian Authority or others to play this. They also attempted for a while to bribe the tribal leaders in Gaza to do a revolt against Hamas, and they failed there. So now the only thing that they could rely on is the remnants of ISIS inside Gaza. And this gang that attacked these trucks, the leader of ISIS in Gaza was amongst them, and he got assassinated, taken out by Hamas just in this operation. And so he was originally jailed inside Gaza, and when the Zionist invasion happened and they attacked all the jails and police stations inside Gaza, he escaped, and he regrouped his ISIS remnants inside Gaza to work for the Israelis on the ground, attacking the aid trucks, the little amount of aid trucks that make it, and then to sell it at 100 times the market value to the starving population in Gaza. And so we saw the Zionist media and a few media outlets in the West try to pretend that what happened actually in this incident was Hamas looting the aid. And of course, the story was so big and was covered from so many angles by media in the region here that the majority of the Western outlets decided not to commit suicide as they did with the Amsterdam quote-unquote pogrom story. This was too too ridiculous to do. So we got some of the truth being told in this story. And yes, Hamas is in full control, along with the resistance groups off the ground in Gaza. Today, after 2 months of full blockade on the Jabalia in the north area of Gaza, the starvation and the eradication of the population in the area, the Zionists had a huge, what they call security incident, meaning one of their attacking groups got into an ambush in Jabalia, and they lost tanks and officers in this action. And this is what's been happening every day in Jabalia since the beginning of the blockade on it. And that shows you how defeated the Zionist military is.
And so, with the point of this shows us how defeated the Zionist military is, it seems as though there are parallels to draw between this and what's happening in Ukraine in terms of the Ukrainian army as a Ukrainian army has been decimated. They are really down to almost having zero artillery. They have their weapons have been decimated, and so the United States has to step in because we know nature deplores a vacuum. The United States has to step in along with other NATO countries and fill the vacuum. It sounds like the United States is doing very similar things in the Middle East.
Oh yes, and we had two stories that we heard over the last week that can tell us what's happening really within the Israeli military. One of them is the German government admitted that it gave 40,000 refugees from Western Asia and North Africa a fast track into citizenship if they serve in the Israeli military. And we're talking basically about the remnants of Al-Qaeda and ISIS that the West took back home after the failures in Syria. And now they are on the ground already fighting, 40,000. This is just Germany. So what is how many did France offer the same kind of fast track into citizenship? How much Britain, the US, Canada did? Above and beyond that, we heard another story, Canada offering a fast track into citizenship to 10,000 Israelis. So that means there's a huge exodus of the Zionists from historical Palestine. And according to the Israeli military, they are short 25% of their recruitment needs, meaning 25% of those who are being called into service are not showing up. So the Israeli military is collapsed. Most of the Zionists are leaving, and what's replacing them is huge armies of mercenaries wearing Israeli fatigue, and or the special forces of the NATO governments, including the US Navy SEALs and others that are actually on the ground inside Gaza. And this, now makes sense why when we see a Israeli tank being blown up, which has at least 4 soldiers inside it, the Israelis are reporting 1 Israeli soldier dead. Most probably the other 3 are Western special forces that we don't hear about their casualties, and mercenaries that nobody cares about them if they even come back from the battlefield.
You've just mentioned Canada offering citizenship to Israelis. A lot of people, when Justin Trudeau became the Prime Minister of Canada, a lot of folks were buying into this myth that he was some progressive, that he was some liberal, echoing some of the policies of his father, the Prime Minister before him. But what we're now finding out is that Justin Trudeau is, to a great degree, a lapdog of the United States and is doubling down, whether it's discussing immigration issues as it relates to Canada, whether it's a matter of backing the Zionist settler colony in Israel. That Justin Trudeau is no liberal, no progressive, no friend of peace-loving people.
Oh yes, and
I didn't mean to choke you up with that one, man. But go.
yes. I mean, me and Trudeau, we go way back. He attacked me by name 8 times in the parliament in Canada and on the media. And no, Trudeau is definitely most liberals in general in the West play this role of subduing populations to the will of white supremacy, basically. And we've seen the Democratic Party play that with the Black communities and other minority communities in the US to subdue them, not to shake the boat too much, rock the boat. Mm-hmm. So, and Canada has absorbed every fascist that you can think in the world. There was, I think, something like 40,000 Nazi Ukrainians that were absorbed into Canada after World War II. The Vietnamese collaborationists were absorbed into Canada. The Chilean dictatorship, the Cambodian junta, all of those were absorbed and given citizenship wave after wave since the end of World War II in Canada. And we know also that the remnants of Al-Qaeda and ISIS in Syria, when the Syrian government was going to crush them around the Golan Heights, were also sneaked out through the Zionist colony to Canada and given citizenship. And before them, the Phalange, the Christian supremacists that committed all the massacres in the Palestinian refugee camps in Lebanon in the 70s and 80s, were also given citizenship in Canada after the liberation of Lebanon in 2000. So Canada is a safe house for all the fascists on the planet whenever they are defeated somewhere else.
What would you say, what are the 2 or 3 big stories today or yesterday that are happening on the ground? Oh, no, before we get there, freepalestine.video. We always got to let people know, freepalestine.video. Explain to the audience where to go, why they should go there, what it is your Free Palestine video project is accomplishing.
Please, you can go to the website. We are producing content from the ground, daily reports from the West Bank, from Lebanon, and from Jordan, all produced by youth that we're training and so on. You're hearing firsthand stories from the battlefield in English in all of those zones that nobody else is offering. By the way, yesterday our TikTok page was nuked, and then within a few hours our YouTube page was also banned with no reason given to either. And we did a campaign to get our YouTube page back. We informed the public, and people, all of them came to our support, and now we got our YouTube page back. So thank you, everybody. We are demonetized on all platforms. We depend on donations. We are in need of 100 monthly subscribers at $100 or 1,000 at $10 to be able to stabilize our production costs. We are doing interviews with personalities here in Lebanon and around the region that you don't hear anywhere else with our flagship show, Wartime Cafe. And so this is a unique service. You can find us on YouTube still at TV Free Palestine. Similarly on X, we're on 12 different platforms, just in case, with all the attacks on free speech that are happening in social media. And you can find the links to all our social media accounts on our website, freepalestine.video. But please subscribe, monthly donation to sustain this production.
So what are one of the things that doesn't surprise me, but always amazes me when I talk to you, is I can read Electronic Intifada, I can read a number of the websites, but no matter what I read, you always tell me the story that just broke is. And so give our audience 2 or 3 things that they need to be paying attention to that they're not going to hear on MSNBC, MSNBCIA, or CNN. What's really happening on the ground right now?
What's happening on the ground right now is, over the last 24 hours, the Zionists attacked Beirut 3 times. This is the first time they attack Beirut proper. They've been attacking the suburbs. And the last attack was 500 meters away from the parliament in Beirut. And that was all hours before the arrival of the American negotiator, who's an Israeli officer, Hochstein. So it was an attempt to threaten the government of Lebanon that they will be killed if they don't accept the surrender that Hochstein was bringing with him. He was demanding that Lebanon sign on a ceasefire that allows Israel to invade Lebanon anytime it wants to and bombard it from air anytime it wants to. So basically, it's a surrender. And in response to that, Hezbollah for the first time hit the heart of Tel Aviv, hitting a important Mossad, office in the middle of Tel Aviv. Has been bombarding Haifa and much of the north of Palestine over the last 24 hours. Haifa is practically empty. This is the second largest, city in the Zionist colony. And, it's been 3 days the Israelis are trying to circle around the frontline villages that they've failed to capture in South Lebanon after 50 days. They are attempting to go around these villages through the woods to reach the third line villages. And they got caught in multiple ambushes just a few hours ago. They lost four Merkava tanks, all documented. People saw it on air, their tanks burning, and they had to retreat. So they're totally defeated on the ground here in the border with Lebanon.
Totally defeated on the border with Lebanon. Where right now would you say Iran is in terms of their decision making, their responses? Because from the Western side, it's been pretty quiet. We haven't really heard a whole lot of discussion about Iran, particularly as we're looking at the incoming Donald Trump 47 administration. Are they laying back, waiting to see what's going to happen post January 20th? What's your sense of where is Iran right now in responding to this genocide?
Yep. Well, Iran is still promising to deliver true promise number 3, their last retaliation to attacks on Iran that they haven't done yet. So it's going to happen. The other thing that we can judge what's happening in Iran's mind is the increase of the attacks in Iraq from Iraq on the Zionist colony. It's now like double, if not triple, the daily attacks happening from Iraq. And the Zionist colony just threatened a few hours ago to bomb Iraq. And we've seen also an increase in the Yemeni attacks. And yesterday, Yemen, for the first time, attacked a Turkish flagged ship belonging to the largest Turkish shipping line that has been the main resupplier for the Zionist colony. So now we see Yemen raising now the stakes and punishing Turkey for its two-faced statements about Palestine. And that wouldn't happen if we're not already in a new stage of this war. And similar with the attacks here from Lebanon on the Zionist colony, we're upwards of 40 somewhat attacks from Lebanon, waves of attacks on the Zionist colony a day, and this is unprecedented. So I think everybody, the Zionists will try to score as many points as possible before Trump comes in, so to give him a better chance if he wants to negotiate, a better hand at the table and or on the battlefield. And there's an impetus now on the axis of resistance to score as many points as possible before the coming of Trump to sway him towards negotiating instead of going to full war. But I think no matter what anybody tries, we will be in a full-out war with the U.S. involved in it, maybe even before Trump comes into power.
So where are we now? And I've got to thank Daniel for his super sticker. Daniel, thank you so much. Greatly appreciate that. And I'm looking for, I think we got a couple of others. Give me a second, folks, to recognize you all for providing the love and the support. And again, you also got to go to freepalestine.video and support freepalestine.video. You mentioned Yemeni attacks on Turkish flagged ships. We were hearing stories, I think it was just yesterday, that Turkey was providing sanctuary to Hamas leadership, and Turkey was saying, "Oh, no, they're really not here anymore. They were passing through on vacation on their way to to I don't know where." Anyway, so if you could quickly, because one of the things we've always asked about Erdogan is he says one thing, but he always means and does something else. And for those, I always tell folks, you really need to look at a map to really understand what's going on here, because you've got Ansar Allah on the Red Sea side, then you also have the Persian Gulf on the other side and the Indian Ocean at the bottom. So world shipping access to energy can be greatly impacted in a very simple, very short way if Yemen and Iran decide that they're just going to shut this thing down.
Oh yes, and it is kind of so people can understand what the U.S. Is trying to play. It's not only about keeping the Zionist colony. There is only two major regions that produce oil that are competitors to the U.S. in the market, and that was Russia and the Gulf area. And the U.S. had wanted to take out Russia out of the market so it can raise the prices of oil and save its economy. But because Russia and OPEC Plus refused to cut back the flow, and Russia found other ways to flood the European market through India, the price of oil and gas stayed stable, and that is harming the American economy. So the United States, no matter who's in power, has a impetus to take out one of the two, either the whole Gulf and or Russia out of the market totally, in order to save itself. And so while the Gulf countries seem like to be good lapdogs of the US, and people would think that maybe the US wouldn't want to burn the oil of those countries, because they're good lapdogs, actually they could be sacrificed. And so the US may start a war with Iran, not only to take out Iranian oil and gas out of the market, but to also take out the Gulf oil and gas itself out of the market. And then all of Europe, Latin America, and Africa will be hostage to American oil and gas.
And evidence of that, of course, is the destruction of the Nord Stream pipeline under Joe Biden when he first came in to office, decimating European access to Russian oil and gas. And I say decimated because there is still one functioning element of the pipeline, but the United States won't allow the pipeline in Europe to be turned up. And, that now seems to be ancient history, but that is still incredibly relevant as it relates to the equation. So as we get out, Laith, Marouf, again, folks, please go to freepalestine.video. Please go to freepalestine.video. What do you want my audience to take away from our conversation today, Laith, Marouf?
I would say anyone that's watching us in the West must prepare. You could see what's happening in Ukraine. We could see what's happening here in West Asia. This is not we're already in a world war. It's just not declared by the different parties. The next stage of this world war is direct confrontation between the actual powers like Iran, the US, and the United States, and Russia. So people that want to save their own countries and don't want to see us in a nuclear war need to move now and save their country by putting pressure on their governments to change that reality. And so it's the last minutes for us to save all of humanity, actually.
Laith, Marouf, my dear brother, thank you so much for your time as always. Greatly, greatly appreciated. Peace and blessings to you and the family, and look forward to having you back.
See you soon, Wilmer.
Thanks, man. Thank you. Mark Sleboda, our first guest today. Thank you, as always. Greatly appreciate that. Folks, thank you all so much for listening to the Connecting the Dots podcast with me, Dr. Wilmer Leon. Tomorrow, we're going to be talking immigration. And for those of you that don't know, Maru Mora Villalpando, she is an activist. She's going to be joining us from the West Coast, talking about immigration, talking about Donald Trump announcing that when he is sworn in on the 20th, he's going to announce a national emergency, and he's going to use the U.S. military on the border, and he's going to use the U.S. military to have this mass deportation. Now, we know he says a lot of things, and in many instances does not do the things that he talks about. This one, though, could very well be different. We're going to be talking to Maru Mora Villalpando tomorrow here on Connecting the Dots. So you're really going to want to be here. Stay tuned, as always, for new episodes every day. Maru Mora Villalpando tomorrow. Also, please follow and subscribe, leave a review, share the show, follow us on social media. You'll find all the links in the show description below. Remember, folks, that this is where the analysis of politics, culture, and history converge, because talk without analysis is just chatter, and we don't chatter here on Connecting the Dots. See you all again tomorrow. Until then, I am Dr. Wilmer Leon. Have a great one. Peace. I'm out.
Connecting the Dots with Dr. Wilmer Leon, where the analysis of politics, culture, and history converge.